What's going on, everybody? It's Dr. Dill here, and today I've got a very hot topic that comes from my heart and soul for you guys. Recently I decided to replay one of my favorite turn-based RPGs, Persona 5. Specifically the Royal Edition. I've found it's vastly easier to get through, and I can't afford to waste any time on frivolous activity like in the original. Yeah, can't afford to waste time. So as I'm playing one of my favorite games and enjoying life, as you do, I decided to hop on Twitter, as you do when you don't want to love life anymore, and holler into the void to my beloved mutuals. Come to find out, two of my good friends on there are playing through the game as well, and they're live tweeting the game. I get to talking with them about our experiences, maybe live tweet a couple of things myself. We have some fun, comparing how we handled different bosses, complaining about certain characters, and lusting after others. This is not a joke. This is a call out for help. Tai Takemi, please. More important than all of that, though, we came to a pretty similar train of thought that got me thinking. Ryuji gets kinda shit on a lot, doesn't he? I voiced the opinion that the amount of hate that Ryuji gets from his fellow Phantom Thieves is kind of forced, and though most of my friends agreed with me, a lot of people really missed my main point about it. That main point being that the fault lies entirely with the writers. I think they mischaracterize a lot of the members of the Phantom Thieves to unjustly turn their ire to Ryuji. I don't think that Morgana is all that annoying, but I do agree that he is the only person that makes sense to dislike Ryuji. I also agree that the focal point of the Ryuji hate comes from him.
You're telling me you want to stay in a place like this?
Wait a minute. Were you planning on taking these guys out of here?
We can't just leave him here!
How stupid can you be?
What?
These are only humans in Kamoshida's cognition. They aren't real humans that have entered from reality. They're different from you two.
Damn it!
Clean them up this instant!
We're outnumbered. Let's scram before we get surrounded.
We're not gonna do anything and just run?
Thank God you've got a level head.
Fine. Is this a skull?
Your appearance reflects your inner self. It's the rebel that slumbers within. Not that you'll get it.
Nope.
Then stop asking questions and accept what you see for what it is.
Easy for you to say. Wait, we're in deep shit!
I said to be quiet!
We might have gotten away here, but we're still screwed with Kamoshida at the real school.
That's quite sharp of you, for being an idiot.
The part that gets me riled up is that it's not limited to him.
If I had to choose, guess I'd go with a toned, fit girl with a nice tan. But I gotta say, it's hard to pass up the shy bookie type with glasses, too.
So in summary, you have no preferences at all. Simply put, you are a desperate scavenger. Let us move on from such pitiful convictions. Joker, what qualities do you value in a woman? So you would accept any and all with open arms? You are the very portrait of a gentleman.
What the hell? He said the same thing I did. If anything, it was even worse.
Now I know that Ryuji's not a perfect person, but he's almost religiously the butt monkey for the jokes in Persona 5 and often just gets yelled at or verbally harassed for no reason. Like, I get it. He's crass, foolish, reckless, he speaks without thinking far too often, but none of the Phantom Thieves are without their faults. Yet we far too often see Ryuji being the one getting ganged up on. So I got to thinking, why is it that Ryuji always gets treated like the butt of the joke every chance the game gets? The only reason I could honestly find was that he was less intelligent, usually falling into the dumb brute archetype. It's really easy to fall back on the stereotype that there's nothing much bumping around in his head. His offered dialogue tends to edge toward acting before thinking. He says some pretty dumb stuff, and he can be a little perversive. Notwithstanding Yusuke asking On to strip for him for art or generally being grabby at all, but when Ryuji likes to stare at people he finds physically attractive, suddenly says, higher.
I'm the Joker, baby!
For legal reasons, that was a joke. Let's be honest with ourselves. Ryuji's lecherous activity is worth condemning, yes, but I don't think the rest of his foibles are. He's reckless, yes, but he's reliable. When Ryuji sets his mind on a goal or tries to do something, he does it. He's always there for the PTs whenever they call on him, like for shopping trips, outings, helping Futaba acclimate to social activity. He's always supportive of their choices, even if he doesn't get it. And he very often doesn't get it. He's simple and a little left behind, speaks without much thought put into his words, calls things out for what they are, but his bluntness and impatience comes from his utter acceptance of those around him. He doesn't know how to best describe things or word things, and it gets him in hot water, but he stands by his friends to the bitter end. Where does the narrative get so muddied on Ryuji, who is arguably the most important member of the Phantom Thieves? And I do say that with 100% sincerity. To me, no one else, not even Joker, the fool card himself, the trickster, personifies what the Phantom Thieves stand to fight for better than Ryuji. Let me paint you a picture really quickly. I lied, it's not going to be that quick at all. I really got to pad this video out, and you guys are going to be the ones to suffer for it. Picture this. You're a kid coming out of middle school and showing absolutely zero aptitude for your studies whatsoever. Your father's left you and your mother, and she's stuck working multiple jobs just so that she can make enough money to keep you safe and healthy. You live in Japan, where such a thing is seen as unsightly and unattractive, so there's basically no chance she'll ever get any outside support. You're basically baggage holding your family down at this point. So what do? You take stock of what you're good at, and you come up with a reasonable conclusion. You're relatively physically fit and active and show some promise in track and field. Hell, you're so good at it that you see an avenue to take your team to nationals by the time you make it to high school as a freshman. If this lines up well enough, by third year you're going to be able to expect a good scholarship and actually be able to take care of your mother well into your 20s. You even manage to get into a high school that's notable for its Olympian alumnus. Your plans are coming to fruition. At least, they are until you have an encounter with that alumnus one day.
No!
What a worthless piece of trash, getting emotional so quickly. How dare you raise your hand at me? Though it was only temporary, have you forgotten my kindness in supervising track practice?
It wasn't no practice, it was physical abuse! You just didn't like our team!
It was nothing but an eyesore. The only one who needs to achieve results is me. That coach who got fired was hopeless too. Had he not opposed me with a sound argument, I would have settled it with only breaking his star's leg.
What?
Do you need me to deal with your other leg too? The school will call it self-defense anyway.
Damn it. Am I gonna lose again? Not only can I not run anymore, the track team is gone too because of this asshole!
So that's why.
You find yourself being constantly tormented and mistreated alongside your fellow track and fielders by that self-same alumnus that made your school such a prestigious athletic environment. Every day is made harder than the last, receiving harassment that eventually turns your own teammates against you until it becomes too much and you reach your boiling point. You snap and lash out against your oppressor, and the worst thing possible happens. You get baited into making the first move. It's predicted, expected, and that alumnus who kept tormenting you breaks your leg in self-defense. You can hear the air quotes. Because he's manufactured this exact event into happening. You, the star runner of the track and field team, right before nationals, have a violent outburst against a teacher and ruin your and your teammates' only chance at national level play, and in the same motion have your entire future career and scholarship flushed down the drain. Not too long after that, your mother gets called to a school for a meeting about your outburst and performance. You're not exemplary in your studies, so this was your only chance. This was the only thing you had going for you. They know this just as well as you do, and they hammer it into your mother that she's the one who failed you, that she is the one responsible for raising you so poorly, that she's as much of a failure as you are. On your way home, despite all of your excuses, your anger, your frustration, all she can do is apologize to you. Your entire trip home is filled with your mother apologizing for not being able to be there for you, for being a single mother, for not being good enough. Do you honestly think you would be able to come out of that experience, what amounts to a year's worth of physical and emotional abuse, and all of your time spent and potential thrown down the drain, without having a chip on your shoulder? Anger issues, reckless behavior, zero motivation to participate in school. I really can't blame him for any of his flaws. Ryuji Sakamoto is not many things, but he knows exactly what he wants. There's no point in the game where Ryuji tries to be anything he isn't. He may lack the grace of Yusuke or the tact of An, but he gets way more flack than he deserves. I mean, consider this. Ryuji not only has a hand in introducing us, the player, to 7 different social confidants, 8 if you count Morgana himself, who you'd never have met without Ryuji accidentally plugging in the root on the nav, but because of that, he's also the entire reason that the Phantom Thieves even exist in the first place. Ryuji is the person who says you guys should go back into the castle, and even without powers of his own, he comes prepared to make sure that you can hold your own for the both of you. He understands that, as he is, he'd be dead weight, so he brings in medicine, and even has enough of an understanding of the world, or at least enough foresight of the world that they're diving into, to bring a pretty useful weapon in the fake gun. It's lucky, sure, but Ryuji has your back from the start when no one else does. Even Morgana is doubtful of the two of you, marking you both off as unhopefuls, and begins his resentful treatment of Ryuji at the same time. His resentful treatment when you're absolutely on the floor for allies. Morgana is doubtful, Ryuji is hopeful. I've been told before that Ryuji's crass nature is cause for a hefty amount of the problems that the Phantom Thieves experience. Things like Morgana's departure, or Futaba's shadow going rogue on the Phantom Thieves while they're in their palace. Or, my personal favorite, Makoto finding out about their identities through our phone call with Ryuji, while she has us cornered. Heaven forbid he gets caught on recording while they're talking out loud about their actions at the Phantom Thieves at their own school, or that Joker answers his phone on speaker and doesn't mention that he's on speaker when he does so.
Was it blackmail? Hypnosis? That's the same as admitting to it, you know. Go ahead.
Hey, where you at? Taking a leak? Let's meet up at the usual spot to hold our Phantom Thieves meeting.
Petition to help Joker figure out that his phone has a volume function and he doesn't have to answer on speakerphone every single time. Makoto had all of the proof she needed from eavesdropping on the trio Joker, Ryuji, and An. She was already going to pressure Joker into bringing him to the PT's hideout, which is still in public, so Ryuji calling Joker at that time really changed very little. And honestly, as far as Futaba's shadow goes, I never really got the feeling that in her palace, Ryuji yelling at her shadow made any difference whatsoever. At that point, it was the last moment the PTs interacted with her shadow, and up to that point, she'd been falling split between pushing them away by springing traps and trying to welcome them further in. From the very start of her palace, Futaba is shown to suffer from schizophrenia and ends up locking herself away from others as a force of habit. She pushes her loved ones away, despite the fact that she wants help more than anything, and that extends to anyone who seeks to help her out. Any aid offered is treated as a threat in her mind, no matter how badly she wants it to be otherwise. The Phantom Thieves had suffered traps and pitfalls and even verbal harassment at the hands of Shadow Futaba because she represents the worst aspects of Futaba's dark side. No amount of candied words or actions would have eased their access to Futaba's treasure, so in that same vein, neither did Ryuji's snapping at her shadow hinder them any more than the shadow originally had. To call out Ryuji for lashing out, and honestly rightfully so, against a mental construct, not to mention that we've never actually seen anyone interact with their own shadow before, and Futaba doesn't interact with her own until she gets the metaverse nav on her phone and enters her own consciousness. It feels really heavy-handed to outright pin all of the blame on Ryuji, how the Phantom Thieves tend to do given evidence showing otherwise. The topic of Ryuji and Morgana's falling out, on the other hand, is another story. I don't necessarily believe the blame rests solely on Morgana's shoulders, as a lot of Ryuji apologists tend to, and To that same end, I don't think that Ryuji is exempt from the blame either. Morgana, long before their falling out, had started struggling with his identity crisis stemming from his amnesia. Since he's a being born from mementos and had his memories tampered with, he had no idea as to why he was desiring to be around humans so much. It pained him to believe he was just a cat, a mere pet to and for his allies' purposes. Morgana's far more intelligent than any simple pet, and he had his own desires to be seen as more than that, to be needed. I want to talk about Morgana a bit in depth, but I'm not going to do so here. If you're interested in that video, then let me know below, but for the sake of this one, this following bit is going to be more than enough to suffice. In between the Futaba and Okumura acts, we see Morgana suffering from nightmares about his conception. His doubts are causing him an intense stress for what he truly is, yet he doesn't feel comfortable in talking about his stress to his allies. That stress then evolves into a deeper insecurity. In short form, no pun intended, we see him gain something almost like a Napoleon complex revolving around the fact that he doesn't want to be seen as nothing more than a cat. Morgana's gripes with pussy denial then compound on... What the fuck up, I actually wrote that into the script, what is wrong with me? Those feelings then compound on top of his feelings of decreasing usefulness as Futaba shows her acuity not only in the real world, but mementos too. She's not only the first person who doesn't need Morgana to explain what mementos is and how it works, but she's also able to teach the Phantom Thieves and even Morgana himself a little bit about how the cognitive world functions. Morgana is then forced to stick around Futaba as the rest of the Phantom Thieves go off to Hawaii together on their school trip. During that time, we see that Futaba, with her socially awkward tendencies, inadvertently treats Morgana exactly how he was afraid of being treated, like a pet. She ignores his mumblings, she doesn't respond to him when he does speak clearly, and when he gets annoying to her, she begins to pet him and patronize him, which he clearly doesn't like. As I said, it's patronizing, and I understand his resentment. What I find interesting, however, is that his resentment doesn't grow outwardly towards Futaba, the person he perceives as taking his place in the group, but he internalizes it instead. Then Ryuji, the person who sees what he's doing and try to compare himself to her, he tells him, don't try to compete with her. I said before that Ryuji understands his friends, and I really stick by that. But I also said that Ryuji doesn't always pick the right words to say. He cares for each of his friends and he supports their rights, but most of all he supports their wrongs. He calls his fellow Phantom Thieves out on bullshit when he sees it, and he knows when he's giving too much slack on himself. People have bad days. Ryuji gets that more than anyone. So when he sees Morgana trying to elevate himself in the eyes of his friends out of desperation to prove his worth, he calls him on it. Ryuji, who Morgana hasn't said a single nice thing about once, is the only Phantom Thief aside from Joker, the player, who sees Morgana as vulnerable here. And he reaches out in the only way he knows how. I'm a guy. I mostly have friends who are guys. We make playful jabs at each other. But the problem with... Your dick is so small, bro. What the fuck are you doing? And the problem with playful jabs is they can be misconstrued as targeted harassment. My god, Ryuji is literally me and my friends. The first thing he says to Morgana when he's feeling vulnerable is, well, she was more useful than you as a matter of fact. Ryuji, honey, sweetie, darling, dearest, what the fuck would possess you to say that to Morgana in this exact instant? I can't say anything really because I'd have said the exact same thing. The next thing he says? Don't try to compete with her. Morgana doesn't even have the confidence to argue with Ryuji at this one. That right there is strike 2. Thinking that this is something Ryuji genuinely feels and internalizing his self-doubts, Morgana takes the next swing at Ryuji, issuing his own challenge. But this isn't really the time nor place for it. They had just come back from their vacation and found out that the mysterious masked persona user has assassinated their principal, and they may need to lay low for a bit to avoid suspicion. Everyone is on edge about taking the heat from this event that's the next hot topic in the news. The Phantom Thieves have their first moment of doubt, but Ryuji is firm in believing that they were right to form up together. He may be getting big-headed, yes, but you've got to look at it from Ryuji's point of view. All his life he's been fucked over by the adults looming over him. His teachers, his advisors, and looked down upon by his peers because of them. Had rumors made about him. Had his mother lambasted in front of him. In his eyes, the Phantom Thieves don't just represent his own justice against them, but a clear path to his future opening up again. Principal Kobayakawa's death is a tragedy, and he knows that. But he's also been branded as a delinquent and cast aside in part due to his own negligence. Josh, buddy, doll, are you good? To quote the forums, covering up crimes is wrong after all. Ryuji's only trying to help his friends move beyond their doubts and allay his own at the same time. Adversely, Morgana is trying to spearhead their next heist to regain some level of perceived control over the group, to rekindle that feeling of being needed, of being useful to them. Ryuji is getting a big head, but so is Morgana, and on the point of targeting Okumura, they both agree. They're getting swept up in the trap laid out for them for entirely different reasons. This groundswell attracts Morgana because this is their next big target, and if he spearheads this mission, he regains the trust of his group that he thinks he's lost. Ryuji seeks out this mission because it's massive, and its success means that the group is bringing him one step closer to his ideal future, one where he can become successful for his mother's sake. He identifies that future with things like women and money, things that are quantifiable, materialistic. Women are not objects, Josh. Check your writing, please. But above all else, he's looking to the future while Morgana is only seeing what's directly in front of him. When Ryuji sees his teammates all backing down from the case, he gets the hint. Maybe this is too much. Maybe they're flying too close to the sun. Ryuji backs off. But Morgana, he doubles down. And he doesn't just attack Ryuji, but Morgana calls out all of the Phantom Thieves. Despite apparently having a problem with all of their lack of conviction, he chooses to target mainly Ryuji, the only one who sided with him in the first place because he backed down first. He chooses this moment to introduce a schism in the group where there really is none. I guess hoping that people would take his side, but ultimately he's in the wrong here, and he has to know that too. Morgana continues his tirade against Ryuji, knowing full well Ryuji will accept his challenge and give him ample reason to break away from the group. And this is exactly why I like this scene. Ryuji isn't being targeted for no reason here like he usually is. Morgana does this strategically to pin everyone against him so he can leave on bad terms. Because if he leaves of his own accord, he doesn't have to suffer the indignity of being kicked out later when his use has run its course. And Ryuji plays right into his little kitty paws. My blonde baby boy just thinks this is a regular fight and he goes along with it wholeheartedly. I've said it before because it still rings true, but Ryuji knows his friends, and he knows Morgana needs to let off some steam here. But beyond all that, he knows that Morgana doesn't actually want to leave. And he's not the type of person to just take the abuse sitting down. So, it's business as usual. Morgana goes out and gets himself kicked around a little bit, and the Phantom Thieves eventually come to the consensus that maybe they do have to attend Okumura. Their paths realign because of course they do, and here's the part that really ticks me off. The Phantom Thieves place all of the blame for this falling out squarely on Ryuji's shoulders. No one brings up how harshly Morgana lashed out on him, just that Ryuji defended himself. And honestly, Ryuji didn't go as far as he could have with his defense. The worst Ryuji insinuated was that Morgana had his own motives for going after Okumura, which he does. He's always saying that he has his own motives for being a Phantom Thief. Morgana insults Ryuji, goads him into a fight, and then spits on his dream of a future. Ryuji has every right to be upset at Morgana and hold a grudge against him. All it takes for Morgana's foul mood to clear up is An and Joker blowing some smoke up his ass. You're vital to the team. We weren't taking your feelings into consideration. Won't you put this event behind us? Doesn't it sound like someone else could stand to hear these words too? They even try to force Ryuji to apologize to Morgana, and to his credit, he does! In his special Ryuji way of doing things.
Lady An. Everyone, shouldn't you be using code names?
Ryuji didn't really mean what he said, you know?
He wants to apologize.
Well, it's like, it was my bad too. I mean, I don't mind if you're not human or if you're useless.
I mean, at least he's honest. It's unfortunately something you have to read into because it's possibly the worst possible response ever. I don't care if you're not human implies I also don't care even if you turn out to be a cat. Your identity to me goes beyond your physical appearance, which is something he's been called out about many times before. Ryuji sees past skin level, despite having obvious preferences. He doesn't care what people look like, it's just what they act like. And I don't care that you're useless is quite a bit worse, but speaking as a person who's been flat broke, if your friends stick by you, take you out for food, invite you to the movies, cover for you and yours when you can't do so yourself, nothing in the world means more than that. What Ryuji is trying, and honestly failing, to say is that he'd ride for Morgana regardless of his circumstances. And unfortunately, all that Morgana hears, and for very good reason given his circumstances, is that he's, quote, just a useless cat to them after all. Morgana says it himself. He's protecting his pride with this whole farce. In the end, Morgana does get caught when he challenges the group. It's Haru who ends up saving him by creating a distraction, and then he's saved by the Phantom Thieves again as Haru is accosted by her fiancé. Maybe he really is useless. Or at least maybe he's right in feeling that way. Okay, back to the really nice details about this entire debacle. As everything comes to a head and we're finally forced into our deadline, we as players feel the stress of this situation. On a replay, however, we notice the depth of what's actually happening here as the Phantom Thieves come back together. Morgana steps forward toward Ryuji and offers him an apology, not the Phantom Thieves as a whole, because it was Morgana who lashed out first against Ryuji, and it was Ryuji who took the fall. Ryuji kneels down to address him and speaks calmly in response to his apology and his request. It's soft, it's small, and it's all that needs to be said at the moment. Morgana gives the Phantom Thieves an apology in general after that, but he had the awareness to know that he took things too far with Ryuji and needed to mend that bridge first. And Ryuji knew that he had finally let off enough steam to address the real issue with a level head. Sometimes you gotta fight to vent your frustrations enough before you can see the real solution at hand. When Morgana finally admits out loud that being with the Phantom Thieves is the only place he belongs, Ryuji just laughs and says he should have said that from the start. It's such a simple desire, wanting to have a place where you belong, and yet that's really all of the Phantom Thieves and what they resemble. Joker, who was forced to leave his home on a false charge. An, who has the looks of a foreigner, despite being something like a quarter American. Makoto, who spent so much of her time stuck on her studies, she's lost touch with her peers. Yusuke, who's every bit as eccentric as is said about him. Haru, who is forced to live her life as little more than a porcelain doll. And Futaba. And then Ryuji, the kid who had his entire future flushed down the drain by the greed of one man, who was ostracized by his only friends, by his teachers, by society as a whole. Funnily enough, their difference in circumstances set them worlds apart despite their found family in the Thieves. Ryuji is the odd one out when it comes to opportunities. I mean, An is a part-time modeling gig that she's actually really popular from and seems to be naturally gifted with. Yusuke is the apprentice of one of the most famous artists in the field and the son of another famous great who died before her time. He's a prodigy who was offered a second sponsorship by a close friend of his master almost immediately. Makoto is a shoo-in for being a nepo baby with the police force and, having not only a very successful sister, but having a father who was killed in the field. Not to mention she's brilliant in both her studies and with practical application of the law and detective work. Futaba is Medjed. She's so amazing with all things technological that even the ones who took up the name after her are nothing but playthings for her to dismantle at her leisure. And Haru is disgustingly rich, grossly wealthy, and has, I don't know how many, like, they never actually go into depth how many stocks she holds, but it's enough that her uncle wants to, like, take them away from her because it might stress her out, being that she's only a teenager. Even Akechi and Joker fabulously outpace Ryuji in terms of resources. Akechi built himself up from the ground floor and became famous overnight, gaining political resources and training from his earlier years under the wing of Shido. Granted, it was a struggle, and all for the sake of vengeance. He still had more at his disposal if he ever actually decided to choose life instead of petty revenge. And Joker's a wild card. He starts with basically nothing and is forced to move to a new place, but he easily makes thousands, if not millions, by the end of the game from mementos alone, and has insanely high potential to the point of becoming lauded with job opportunities, insanely high experience, and he can become the top of his class by the end of the game that it's laughable to think he could ever fail in his future. Ryuji really starts with nothing, found a foothold to desperately cling to, and then forever loses it all potentially. Out of everybody, he's the only member whose future is uncertain, claiming that he's going to move closer to a physical therapy facility to maybe get his running career back, and potentially go to nationals again. Hell, the only member of the Phantom Thieves who even gets close to Ryuji's uncertain future is Kasumi, and she's borderline $60 DLC. To this day, the Ryuji and Morgana tantrum scene is the only one that makes a lick of sense for Ryuji to get blasted, because he really is the frontman, the very poster child for the Phantom Thieves' desires. That's why I love Ryuji, and that's why I can't stand it when we have scenes like this.
Ryuji!
End with a silly joke like this.
Come on, I almost kind of died. You guys are joking, right?
I'm feeling a bit hungry.
As I was getting footage for this last scene, I ran across a video that said, in cut content, this scene was supposed to be even worse, showing the characters threatening him with death and physically harming him on screen. Go watch the video by Faz. I'm showing it in the image in front of you, and I'm also going to put a link to it in the description. I've watched it myself, and I can't say it's very interesting, but I can say it's infuriating, and I'm glad that they cut it. Ryuji getting beaten to a pulp as the reward for sacrificing his life. Ryuji getting left behind in Shinjuku as two openly gay men drag him off to God knows where. Wild ass moment, by the way, Atlas. We haven't forgiven you for that one. None of these moments are deserved for the main man himself, I'll tell you that much. Now, I'm not saying that none of the Phantom Thieves are going to be the ones to, make the sacrifice play like he did. Makoto, for example, had to play the sacrifice role to get info off of her sister's laptop. Futaba had to make a sacrifice play of sorts to get her hands on Akechi's phone, and we'll always pour one out for An, who nearly had to get nude to get into Yusuke's house. But Ryuji didn't have to be convinced. He doesn't stop to think about the consequences. He doesn't care about what danger befalls him. So long as his friends make it out alive, he'll always be the one to do what he needs to do without a moment's hesitation. That's why Ryuji Sakamoto, to me at least, is the true heart of the Phantom Thieves. Thank you all for watching.
This all is well.
Right on. What's up, Persona? This effing rocks! Now that I got this power, it's time for payback! Yo, I'm ready. Bring it!